the glaciers receding. And I had the privilege of visiting Antarctica last November. And indeed, you could see for yourself how the glaciers have actually receded from their world. And that has contributed to the increase in sea level. And the increase in sea level is very pronounced. 30 years ago, I used to visit this nice resort in Kota Baru. It's called Perdana Resort at Pantai Cinta Berahi. The name is quite something, the beach of passionate love. So it is not quite Syara compliant, so they had to change it to call it now Pantai Cinta Bulan. But the point here is actually in those days, during low tide, you have to walk 400-500 meters to get to the water's edge. So it's a huge sandbank that you actually have to walk across. But today, the whole beach is actually gone. And in fact, the erosion has gone to the extent whereby the stalls that used to be on one side of the road is now gone, completely gone. And they have to build some wave breakers and so on. So the point I wanted to make here is that it's real, not just in Antarctica, but right here at our doorstep. So within the context of business, it is important because not only do you have to comply with the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, the updated one in April 2021, but if you're a company, you're a business, if you don't embrace sustainability, you will not be sustainable because you will be deprived of, number one, from equity funding and debt funding. Institutional investors are very particular, they will invest in you. And likewise, banks will not lend money to you, or even if they do, they will charge you a very high premium for that. Likewise, you can't get insurance cover for your projects, or you have to pay huge premiums for it. You will have difficulty to hire good human capital, young people like you, very conscious about environmental and sustainability issues, and wouldn't want to work for a company that is irresponsible, so to speak. And worse still, if you are not sustainable, your customers wouldn't want to buy your products, and you cannot be part of the global supply chain because that's actually how the rules are today. And therefore, if you can't sell your products, you will basically go bankrupt for sure. Now, a quick reminder of the three elements of sustainability: environmental, social, and governance. For the past few decades, we've been focusing a lot on governance, so I'm not going to talk about that. But during the MCO, the issue of social has come up significantly, and that's within the context of forced labor and modern slavery. And it started in a big way with a number of Malaysian companies being banned from exporting their products to the US. So this is in relation to the withhold release order issued by the US Customs and Border Protection Agency against some glove manufacturers and some plantation companies in Malaysia because of the alleged practices of modern slavery and forced labor. Now, just to be clear, it's not forced labor or modern slavery per se, but under the new definition of forced labor and modern slavery of the ILO, the International Labour Organization, if your workers had to incur that in arriving at your doorstep, so in the past, it was the responsibility of the respective employees, not a concern of the employers. But today, that imposition is solely on the employers, meaning that you cannot allow your employees that work for you to have any debt bondage whatsoever. So the problem here in Malaysia is that when you bring in labor from other countries, if they are from Indonesia, the cost will be quite visible in the sense that it's between 2,000 to 3,000 ringgit. But if you bring some workers from Bangladesh and the Indian subcontinent, the cost can be very prohibitive. So in the case of Bangladesh, for example, it can be as much as 16,000. Now that's not because of the imposition by the Malaysian agents per se, but it's actually because of the arrangements in the home country, so to speak, Bangladesh and so on. And that's actually creating a problem for Malaysian companies. But in the past, they could say, it's not our problem, but I'm afraid today, that's no longer acceptable. It is actually our problem. So the Malaysian companies which I mentioned, the glove making companies and the plantation companies had no choice but to actually pay off all the debt of these workers in order for the ban on their products to be uplifted. So that's a good thing in the sense that it has come to light of the importance of these social issues. So what I'd like to speak today is more on the environmental part. So when it comes to environmental issues, apart from climate change that we're talking about, there's also the issue of biodiversity loss, the resource depletion, waste, pollution, and related to that would be deforestation. Biodiversity loss is important, and this is something which all of us must do together to protect the habitat for wildlife, for example. You will know that in Malaysia, 4 years ago, we have already lost our last rhinoceros. The last one, Iman, actually died in captivity. So that's already extinct, which is sad. And we must learn from that and must never allow our Malayan tiger, which is our iconic species, from going into extinction. And that's our Jata Negara, that's our national crest. It's a symbol of the nation, and we must do what we can. So make sure that, again, do what we can to help protect biodiversity and make sure that no more extinction of species in our lifetime. So Alhamdulillah, the government, together with many NGOs, including WWF Malaysia, have been working to preserve or conserve a tiger population. We now have less than 150 individuals in the wild, but we hope that with all the various initiatives, including putting more boots on the ground and protecting the habitat, will result in increasing in the numbers. So that's something which we hope will do. But back to climate change, it is mainly, if I may, about dealing with our greenhouse emissions. And I think that's actually the biggest single factor that we must work close to. So indeed, we spoke about the fact that climate change is real, global warming is real, and it needed a global solution. So it is great that leading up to COP26 in Glasgow 2 years ago in 2021, we have seen some most countries making up 90% of the global economy have committed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions towards net zero by mid-century. Mid-century referring to 2050 or 2060. And Alhamdulillah, we are proud, we are relieved, we are happy that Malaysia is one of those countries. When the Prime Minister tabled the 12th Malaysia Plan in Parliament in September 2021, we made a commitment that Malaysia will also be a net zero greenhouse gas emissions nation as early as 2050. And that's a big, bold, brave move on the part of the government and on the part of Malaysia as a country, which is great. But obviously, the question would then be, how do we get there, right? And what is our current position? Well, this is where not just relying on government, but the civil organizations got together. And in this particular case, WWF Malaysia worked with BCG, Boston Consulting Group, to come up with a study looking at what are the pathways towards net zero for Malaysia. And this was released ahead of COP26 in November 2021, meant as a public resource. So anyone can actually go through this document, download it, a lot of facts there, and start to actually address the many issues raised there. Now, if you're talking about reducing our emissions down to net zero, we need to understand where we are today. Now, as a nation, like all other countries, we are required to submit every 2 years what we call the biennial update report. Now, so this biennial update report is about the status of our emissions that we have to submit to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and the last submission was in December 2022. So that's BUR4, the one at the bottom. Sorry, you may not be so clear because this is vertical and my slides actually horizontal for me, but I hope some of you will be able to see the numbers here. So just to be clear, if you look at our gross emissions based on the submission made by the government to UNFCCC in December last year, we as a country emit a total of about 372 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Right? Now, this is inclusive of the land use change, the deforestation element. So that's actually the gross number. But we are fortunate because we have our natural forests. So Alhamdulillah, we have some 18 million hectares of forest still in our country, making up about 55% of our land mass, right? And these forests that we have, these are the category of LUCF, the land use change and forestry. They are able to sequester some 256 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, right? So because of that, from 376 minus 256, then you have the net emission of 116 million tons. And this is the figure that we need to bring down to zero, right? Now, how do we do that? Well, obviously from this chart, there are two big things you have to do. Number one, we need to reduce the emissions on the left. And number two, we need to preserve our forests on the right, the green one, right? So, so make sure no more deforestation. That's actually a very, very clear message. And alhamdulillah, the government is already committed to that in a big way. Now, on the left is about how do you reduce your emissions. And of course, you therefore need to address the biggest polluter, the biggest emitter, if you like. And the biggest emitters in the country will be from two particular sectors, the energy and transportation sectors. The energy contributes 52% of the gross emissions, and the transportation 17%. So that's why the government, in our drive to achieve net zero, is targeting the energy sector. So a few weeks ago, the Minister of Economy released the National Energy Transition Roadmap, Phase 1, to clearly provide the idea what we have to do to actually bring down our emissions. And the idea will be to decarbonize our energy sector, among others. For example, is that commitment not to install any more new coal-fired power plant. I think that's a big initiative and commitment on the part of the government. And whatever coal-fired power plants that we have, the PPAs will be allowed to expire as we progress. And that's great. When it comes to transportation, as you know, the huge move towards electric vehicles, and that's why the government is already committing to provide tax exemptions for importation of electric vehicles, the huge movements towards green hydrogen and so on, plus other initiatives. So these many of the initiatives that will have to be undertaken, and with that, hopefully, we will bring this down to net zero towards 2050 or 2060. So, as early as 2050 means that we will need to invest in a number of carbon CCUS, the carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects, and this will cost money. Now, how much will it cost to implement all these various initiatives? Well, based on the study that we have undertaken, it will cost between 425 billion ringgit to 530 billion ringgit to address the emissions gap, right? And now, I must say that it does look like a huge number, about $500 billion ringgit. But if you look at it from the perspective of annual GDP, it is actually only about 1% of our annual GDP. So it is actually an affordable number. But having said that, where are we going to get the funding? Well, if you look at the details, again, based on our study, we find that many of these projects, if you can go to the next slide, please. Now, you can see from this slide that there are many projects that are already commercially viable on its own, without any government funding, without any carbon pricing, right? Then we're talking about 57% of that. That's the first two bars on the left, right? And there will also be some projects which will not be viable even if carbon price will hit 300 ringgit per ton, right? So that's the 6%, the red bar that you have on the very right. But the balance, that's the 37% or so, the three in the middle, in green. These are initiatives or projects that will need some form of carbon pricing between 0 to 300 ringgit, right? This carbon pricing is basically carbon credits that can be traded in the market. Now, the idea is actually for companies, for businesses, we want you to reduce your emissions to arrive at net zero in your operations, right? So that's the target. Now, in cases where it will take time for you to come down to zero, or in some cases it's not possible at all. So what we'd like you to do is to provide that funding for other people to implement projects to reduce emissions in the world. And that's actually the presence of carbon credit, where for these companies, they can buy carbon credit to offset the emissions. Now make no mistake, it is not a substitute. The idea is actually we want you to reduce your emissions, but while you are doing that, you can actually help accelerate the achievement of net zero by buying carbon credits. And for that, we're starting with a voluntary market first. And 2 years ago, Bursa Malaysia was mandated by the government to set up the Bursa Carbon Exchange. And Alhamdulillah, we launched it in December 2022, last year. That was actually within the first week of Minister Nick Nazmi's appointment as a minister. And we had our first auction in March this year. Alhamdulillah, so the market is actually set. Now, again, the idea would be for these carbon credits to be traded to allow investors to actually contribute towards greening the economy, so to speak. Our current approach is actually on secondary issuance basis, but as we progress in the future, it will be done on primary basis, meaning that we can have new projects certified and with the money raised that will help to implement the various emissions reduction projects or nature-based solutions projects in the world. Now, that's something which Alhamdulillah is already in place, but I think we need to actually continuously improve as we progress. Now, we've spoken about what businesses can do, the big picture and so on, but I think what is equally or even more important is for all of us to ask us individually what we can do as an individual, what we can do as a business, and what we can do as a society in order to address and achieve this net zero ambition. Well, the first step is to all of us to make sure that we comprehend, we must understand what this issue is all about. So that's why I spend a bit of time to explain to you where the numbers are, so that you have a better comprehension. So when you understand better, you can embrace the issue better, then you can start to take personal action. So please do that and embrace sustainability in whatever we do. Now, then make a commitment at both your personal level and your professional level. So at home and at the workplace, so to speak. You can start easily by reducing consumption. So don't eat too much. Only only take what you can eat. Make sure that there's no wastage. You don't need to change your clothes every other week. Some people very fashionable every month. They'll change your clothing. No. So I think when you do that, you consume more and you require more resources and so on. So again, optimize your consumption. Use only what you need. And certainly, buffets, for example, make sure that you don't take too much and waste it. Make sure that just take what you need. Reuse and recycle. I think this is a very simple thing to do. You have old clothes, make sure that either you use them, prolong their life, or if you can't fit into them anymore, hand over to someone who will have a good use of it, or at the very least you can actually sell it and so on. Make sure that it's actually being recycled along the way. And that applies to other things that can be repurposed too, right? The fourth point is about, again, simple things about separating your household waste. This is already in the rules by the local authorities, but the actual compliance, as I understand, is actually very, very minimal, even in Klang Valley. So I think it's actually probably less than 40% of households that do that. So I think at your home, start to do that, and have a composting arrangement. All your food waste goes into either a composting block, or you can have a composting container, and from which you can then actually use the compost to grow your vegetables and so on. So again, that will help the environment tremendously. And the last one is to truly optimize your energy consumption. Make sure that you don't waste energy, but when you need energy, use renewable energy. And as simple as if you live in a detached home or landed property, install solar panels on your rooftop. Now, a lot of people think that this is costing a lot, but it is actually an investment. Just to give you an example, if you consume more than 900 kilowatt hours per month, you'll be paying 57 cents per kilowatt hour, right? That's based on today's tariff, and it will go up in the future for sure. Now, meaning that if you consume, say, 2,000 kilowatts in total, you will have to pay about 1,000 ringgit in terms of your bills, right? Now, what that means actually, if you have to put up 10 kilowatt hour peak of solar panel, that will cost you 38,000 ringgit. You'll be saving easily 700 ringgit per month, right? Because your actual production is between 900 kilowatt hours to 1,200. So the one that I installed in my home, I'm getting on average about 1,100 kilowatt hours. So times 57 cents, so that's when you get about 700 ringgit plus. So on per annum basis, alhamdulillah, I'm able to actually get the total savings of about 8,000 ringgit per annum, right? So 8,000 ringgit divided by 38,000, say 40,000. So you're talking about 20% return on your investment. So the point I wanted to make here is actually committing to green doesn't have to cost you. In fact, it can be financially viable for you. And what you need is actually for you to take that first step. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we can all look at ourselves before we ask other people to do it. Ask us, okay, what are the things that we can do at personal level and at your professional level? And if all of us were to do it together, I think inshallah, this country of ours, this world of ours will continue to exist for a better future in a more sustainable way, inshallah. So with that, thank you for your attention, inshallah.